Hi, this is John Reed of johnerp.com. I want to talk with you about an important and annoying issue in the SAP hiring world, which is the issue of version number and experience. In other words, how professionals are assessed in terms of their abilities on the latest releases. And I think it's a very interesting topic, and it came up again in a podcast I just taped that should be out by the time you see this video on SAP CRM skills and trends, which I did with Stephen Johannes and Vijay Sankar, who are both SAP mentors in the mentor program with me. And we did an interesting podcast, and towards the end, Vijay had dropped off the call, and I was asking Stephen about version numbers because it's something that comes up. And I asked him about it specifically in terms of CRM. I was curious if he has opinions about this issue when it comes to hiring, and it turns out he has very strong opinions that a lot of deep CRM consultants who are very good get overlooked just because they don't have experience in 7.0, and so they can be very unrealistic. And you see this across the SAP product line. And here's the problem. I think companies are looking for a way to sort resumes and qualifications. They want to make some cuts to take a big stack of resumes and shorten it down to a smaller and smaller stack until they get to the point where they can hand interview the final selection and make a hire out of that. Now, of course, I'm expressing the paper version of that. Hopefully they're not printing out a big paper stack. Hopefully they're saving the paper and doing it all online. But the point is, they're trying to find a way to cut this down. And they're trying to make life easier if they hire a recruiter who may or may not know a lot about SAP. And so that recruiter might say, well, okay, must have CRM 7.0, which is, of course, the latest release. So that becomes a screening technique. Now here's where the problem comes in. Let's say that becomes a first cut of resumes. Well, what happens when you get someone who maybe has been on a CRM 7.0 project for 3 months, but before that they were I'm trying to think of a good example. Maybe they were selling life insurance. Maybe they were part of a team doing PeopleSoft programming or something. I mean, you just never know how people end up breaking into certain fields. So they don't have this deep, relevant background in CRM or, in particular, in SAP CRM. And then you have another consultant who has deep experience in SAP CRM but doesn't yet have any product experience in 7.0. And that person doesn't make the cut. And Stephen Johannes during the podcast was saying how much that frustrates him because in the case of CRM, there's not a whole lot of differences between CRM 2007 and CRM 7.0. So it doesn't make any sense, he was saying, to exclude those who are expert in 2007 and just haven't got the 7.0 experience yet and who have that deep background. And it drives me bonkers, and I used to see it all the time when I was a recruiter. And what I said during the podcast bears repeating, which is hiring managers and recruiters, you're messing up when you do this kind of stuff because you end up hiring inferior people while better qualified people are not getting a chance in those situations. It's a simplistic view. I understand why it's being done, but it's simplistic. Now here's the thing. In other situations, it does make sense because Stephen also acknowledged that once you go back before CRM 2007 to previous releases, then you're getting to a point where you really are dealing with older technology, older functionality, and it's really not relevant to the current release in the same way. There's been changes that you have to adjust to. In that sense, making those version number criteria on the hires, it makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. So basically, it really depends on the situation. Version relevance is a very situational thing. So that comes back to the SAP professional. What lessons can we take from this little video rant? One is that version experience absolutely matters. So it is important to understand in your area of specialization what kind of exposure you have to different areas and really get a grip on it. And don't think that because you've been doing something for a long time it puts you in a good position, because it might impact you. And that's why it always pays off to have that latest release so that you don't get kind of passed over by that superficial cut. But then just understand what the distinctions are. Sometimes they really are significant, like in the case of the new general ledger in financials, which is a pretty significant change. You got to get on top of that if you're a financials consultant, not let that be an issue. So you need to get that experience, or hopefully at least get the training, and be on top of that. So being aware of the shifts in your area and just being conscious about how much hiring managers do place an emphasis on this, because let's face it, as much as this whole approach to hiring can be kind of short-sighted and stupid, and we're not going to change that. We're not going to change how the recruiting world works. We have to learn how to function within that world. So one thing that I have seen that sometimes does work is if you can develop a really intimate understanding of the shifts and changes within your area, then maybe you can kind of push the envelope a little bit. So you're talking to a recruiter who's looking for someone and they say, well, you know, you really don't have the experience in ERP 6.0 for SD, and so you basically say, well, actually there's really very few changes in SD and ERP 6.0 from the previous versions. And you say, well, I had a little bit of 5.0 experience, it's very similar. Here's a couple of differences I know about in the UI, but I've already taken a look at that on a sandbox system. That kind of stuff can help a little bit to help you kind of slip through the cracks a little bit and maybe get in front of a hiring manager. Because in any kind of hiring process, if you've really got the depth of experience, that's going to come out in the interview setting, especially in a face-to-face situation. So the whole objective behind this is to reach the point where you do get that face-to-face interview opportunity. So understanding how the version number psychology plays out can really help you to strategize around it and make sure that you have the best chance of getting a fair assessment for your skills, and making that case that the depth of experience almost always is superior to some superficial knowledge of the latest release. So it's something that's a reality of hiring in SAP that we do have to pay attention to, but you can probably combat it and overcome it a little bit if you really make a study of the changes in your area and then aggressively pursue them whenever possible. So recently I did a salary survey that I basically worked on with my client Panaya. They basically executed a salary survey and I helped them with some of the questions and design, and we found out that ERP 6.0 upgrade experience did seem to indicate a higher level of salary and pay, and that is echoed in other research that I do see from time to time. So version experience does impact pay, and you can check out that salary report on PanayaInc.com, the Panaya website. I think there's also a mention of it on my homepage on JohnnyERP.com. So I hope that information helps you, and I wish you the best of luck in your SAP interviews and job pursuits in 2010. This is John Reed of JohnnyERP.com.